Okay, so unexpectedly, the lighting is going to be weird in this. I don't know what's going on, but there's some like lens flare issue with the light where I normally film when I'm here. So regardless, the lighting is probably going to be a problem, but I don't care. So back from hiatus of this podcast, I am still currently working on stuff at the moment. From what I didn't address that I said I was going to address, but I'm going to probably readdress it in the live stream that happens after this episode, is that I started working on more music to do with this upcoming music project, to have basically be able to have 2 albums worth of music, and I think I've done that. I'm kind of getting tired of playing the guitar, so I'm going to probably try to do something else in the future with a whole other thing that I don't want to talk much about yet. But it's gonna be doing more with, I got the pro version of Music Maker Jam Session, so I'm just gonna be using whatever I can get my hands on with that. And it will cost money, but I don't really care, considering that it's not going to be much of an issue, and I'm very cautious for what I spend my money on. That being said, though, like, it is draining having to put this next project, like the next project, the project that isn't, announced, is going to take a lot of more time. It's kind of like what was once great. The only difference is there's going to be vocals this time around, and I'm going to be having a lot of fun with the way I make this next thing. And just even thinking about it, it's just it's gonna be so much fun, but it's gonna be so much of a pain. But we'll cover more of that at some other point. I want to continue with the episode. Also, as far as I know, I'm probably gonna have various episodes worth of content after this episode, so might not be another hiatus for a little bit, but it all depends on my mental health, what I feel like is best. We'll get there when we get there. Anyways, this episode 6, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite movies, and honestly, I didn't watch this movie till last year. I was going through my backlog of movies that my grandmother gave me, because there was just some movies that she wanted to keep, then other movies she got, just because they're cheap at a yard sale, and just gave them to us. And I was always, I was very hesitant towards rom-coms, because I'm not really a fan. That's a genre that I like my dramas, and I like my very selective comedies, but romance, not a huge fan of, unless it's, kind of part of another genre that isn't comedy. I'm not a huge fan of comedy, or at least comedy after 2000. And I do like a lot of comedies from the 90s, I guess. So to have something that right off the bat, I was skeptical. I was like, I don't know what this is going to be. Billy Crystal is one of those actors that I really like, but I always don't really think about when I think of like funny comedic actors. And I don't even really think of movies that he's been in outside of this comedy, really. So going into this, I had, as whatever level of expectations I expected to have. Wasn't expected to be blown away. But the way this movie starts out is a phenomenal introduction. It's kind of like, for me, this movie reminds me a lot of 500 Days of Summer, but done in a different, well, you gotta keep in mind that this movie came out way before that movie, where it's like, it's kind of trying to trick you and be like, oh, this is not your typical romantic movie that you're getting into, and which, you know, you should have known that because it's a romantic comedy. So they start off with like these showing like these couples, and you know, they have like whatever music you would hear in Paris, a very classic, jazzy, relaxing vibe to it. And the way this movie is the way this movie is set up, it's set up in a way that I want to say, like, I've seen movies do parodies of this style, but I don't know if this is the first movie to do this style. I don't know if it's if it was copying off of another one, but this movie is played through basically a story through various characters about this one character. Now, it takes place in a restaurant, and it's like these friends are getting together, and this couple, this guy is seeing this girl, and he's telling her about this story about his friend. And his friend who's played by Billy Crystal, is a referee for the NBA. And the whole story is about how he met with this girl. And this is where it's like kind of starts off where you know it's going to be a comedy. Just the way, the idea of Billy Crystal playing a referee, like this short guy who's like, I mean, I don't know the best way to just, like, short and sassy type of character in the NBA is just hilarious. But the real comedy comes like from whenever, how it starts off. So like he basically tells this girl that, yeah, this guy met this girl from burying his father, and the whole story is that his father died. He's having his father moved on a plane to Paris so he can bury him there, and he wanted to be buried there because he fought in one of the wars, and they don't know if he was a good guy or a bad guy. Yeah, so then he ends up meeting like I want to say the person that's in charge of the airport, or at least the person that's in charge of, like, you know, luggage getting moved around. And apparently he got moved to Sweden, and you know, like, he's just, as like someone who would be pissed off, like he has this very like sarcastic, he has a lot of like sarcastic responses, and you start to realize that it's just that, like, that 90s sarcastic level of comedy. He kind of reminds me of like Chevy Chase and like Christmas Vacation, and the way he like delivers some of those lines. And then so then he ends up like basically falling for this girl, and they end up like going, like, he ends up staying longer in Paris than he intended to, and but they still kept in touch, and then he went back, and then, you know, it's just a relationship kind of like going back and forth, and then if I remember correctly, he ends up, I can't remember if she ends up coming there or he ends up going back to Paris, but he finds out that she's married, and she didn't tell him, and it's a relationship that she doesn't want to be in. So then she tells, and then, like, you know, as someone would, he would freak out, but also, like, in the context of the story that's being told to that girl in the restaurant, she's just like, what? Like, because he originally tricked her with one line, and it used for a comedic effect, and then he said it again, and she's like, oh, well, he's just like, wait, are you still joking with me? Are you making sure that I'm paying attention? It's like, no, that actually happened. So then eventually, you know, they get, I'm trying to like keep everything in the same order. And then eventually, you know, more friends show up at the restaurant, and then the story is, like, the narration kind of just happens for like a brief second before it goes into like the continuation of the story. But the continuation of the story is told by, I think 3 different characters. There's the guy, there's the then there's one of the friends, and then the friend's wife, and I think maybe another couple shows up, and then they're still talking about it. But yeah, then eventually once they get married, it's kind of like it's becomes more difficult for the relationship because, you know, he's a referee for the NBA, and she ends up moving away from Paris to come to, I forget, LA. I believe it's LA. Yeah, LA. And from then on, you know, like they're both like at one point one of them's miserable, then the other person's miserable just because like he ended up taking like a year off of refereeing, and then she ended up getting like a better job, so she's working all the time, he's staying home, and like one of them's happy, then the other person's not, and then they're also like communicating along with the other characters that are telling the story in the restaurant. One of them's just a complete asshole, like just saying that like if she doesn't let you do what you want to do, then you gotta divorce her. And then the other, and like, oh yeah, the other thing too, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm like 99.99% sure that one of the wives is actually the voice of Marge Simpson, or the actor for Marge Simpson, and like it's very noticeable. For some reason I didn't pick up on the first watch, but second watch I'm like, yeah, I'm 100% sure that's Marge Simpson. But then like throughout the whole like what do you call it, dysfunctional marriage, eventually she goes back to France, and he's like starting to, you know, kind of enter that depression, but then she ends up coming back. Oh, and he also like there's a huge fit where he's like throwing everybody out of the NBA because I quote the guy, he broke the cardinal sin of refereeing, which is bringing your personal life on the court, and it's very like the NBA stuff is like, it doesn't distract from the film, because I feel like there's 2 specific levels of comedy, and that's like your typical sarcastic lines from the I already forgot his name, but Billy Crystal's character, and then there's just the straight up like other comedic values from other characters, I guess you could say, like, you know, the NBA stuff, and then at one point in the marriage, I don't remember if it was before or after, like things started getting dysfunctional. I'm pretty sure it was during the dysfunction that, and I already forgot the other person's name too, but Deborah's character, ends up having her father, which is, I already mentioned Christmas Vacation, but Uncle Lewis from Christmas Vacation's the actor who played Uncle Lewis as the father, and he just kind of just repeats like, or he just keeps repeating something over and over again. And then like when they're in the car, he's like reading all the billboards and stuff like that. And I don't know why, but I just found it so funny the first time, probably because like entirely different characters from those 2 movies. But watching it again, it was kind of just like, you know, it's kind of like a grin thing. It wasn't like as funny as it was on the first watch. But that whole thing, again, that was a character that was primarily brought to cause more problems, but also kind of a comedic factor, coming from just him being as the character himself, or him making Billy Crystal's character angry. There's one point where like I think the guy's like buttering a toast, and I think if I remember correctly, he kept repeating the first thing that kept repeating the first time he was introduced, and Billy Crystal's like behind him, like doing like the psycho thing, grabbing a knife, going like that. And I just found that so funny. It's still pretty funny even on the second watch. But from that on, like, I feel like the movie didn't give the movie does play through a lot of this dysfunction, but there's not a lot of room for, you know, like when I mentioned that, like, he ended up going into like almost like a depression, like he called, there's one scene that's just like, it makes a lot of sense, but it's just, I don't want to mention it. Like, he calls his friend and he's asking him like, hey, what was that teacher we had in like 4th grade? What was her name? And like, you could just go from there. And then eventually, and like in the other room, there's a person like coughing his head off, but he ended up thinking that he was going to be fighting that neighbor, but then she comes back, and then there's the whole stage of him having, about them trying to have a baby, and there's a problem with having a baby, like on the wife's end, and then you know, they have to go through like whatever one of those methods of if they have trouble with that issue, and there's a point where I feel like this just becomes like, there's one scene, or the scenes to do with this, like you know, like the sperm donor stuff. I just associate that kind of humor with like grandparents. Like, I feel like if I was watching this movie with my grandparents, they would laugh at like you know, his jokes and the stuff that he said about that. Because it's like, you got to keep in mind, it's like, if I remember, like early 90s edgy stuff in a rom-com. I guess one of the funny scenes to like kind of break up the or one of the comedic scenes to come back into play is whenever he has to get to the hospital, and there's a huge traffic jam, so he's just speeding on the side of the like freeway or the freeway, and and then he gets confronted by a cop. And he's just like, I forget what he said. Oh yeah, I gotta get to the hospital. There's 1,000 lives, or there's like 6,000 lives at stake. It's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I gotta get like something to do. Like, I have to like I have this bag, or this in this sperm is like a thing of my, or no, in this bag there's a thing of my sperm. And then he was like. And then it goes back to the narration where it's just like, he spent like 10 minutes telling the cop the whole story so he wouldn't seem like a pervert or something like that. And then the movie ends on the best note possible. So you're left thinking that, like, with the kid and everything, that the relationship, that this whole story was like, it was disastrous from the beginning, or it started off promising and then just got disastrous throughout, and you think that they're not going to end up with each other, and the whole movie's playing this whole, like, from the start, we're like hyping up the introduction to the Billy Crystal's character coming into the restaurant, you know, socializing with everyone, and then it finally, the story is done. So then it continues on like into the present tense, which is him at the NBA game, and they're like saying that, oh, he's like depressed and all that. Shoot, I already can't. Oh wait, no. So they didn't end up having kids. And then that caused her to go away again, and then it cuts to present tense with him, you know, being the referee at the game. It was during I think someone's saxophone with or the person who did the national anthem was doing like a saxophone like solo thing, and then that reminds him of Paris. So he was like, oh, I got to get to Paris. and he was literally like about to go to Paris, and then Deborah's character walks in, and then like, but following up to that point, you know, everybody wants to know like what happened at the NBA game, and then this one guy's just like, oh, I know what happened at the NBA game, and then he tells thing, and then they walk into the restaurant, you know, as a couple again. And it's just one of those movies that does everything that I want out of a romantic comedy, which is you need to balance the style of comedy, and you need to balance the writing of the writing, the pacing, the overall structure of the story, or the love story that you're trying to tell, all in like perfect amounts, to the point where I don't feel like I'm watching just a strictly romantic movie, and I don't want to feel like, oh, well, this is, why should I care about this movie if it's just like slapstick comedy? You know, it's like one of those things, because like I hate modern comedy to this day. There are some good examples of comedies that I have seen recently that were not as bad as like other stuff, but like a movie, I'm trying to think, a movie that I really didn't care for was Anger Management with Adam Sandler and I forgot the guy's name, Jack Nicholson. That movie pissed me off because while there were some funny elements and there was stuff that I was laughing at, in the end, it was just one big, like, screw with this guy's head by the girlfriend. And it just pissed me off. I was just like, wow, that just wasted my time. And then with this movie, you're kind of you're leading up to the point where it's like, okay, well, you know, they're probably not going to end up together, but you know, it was a nice story. But to do that twist at the end and actually have them together, and I know some other people kind of, I know this movie has a mid reputation, and I think it's because a lot of people would just be like, well, with all this, you know, fighting and everything, they shouldn't be together. But, and then the other group argues, well, that's just life. And this movie is a perfect representation of life in the best way possible. And the comedy does not distract you from the story, and the story is interesting enough to not keep you, or to keep you invested throughout. You know, like I said before, I think the movie after I watched this that had Billy Crystal in it was Analyze This, which is an amazing movie. It's a great movie. And I just like, this guy is a really good actor to like kind of, to have like this over the top, but also heartfelt asshole. That's what I would describe him in this movie. To like go from there to have like him as like a therapist in another movie. I don't think I've watched another movie with Deborah, so I would probably have to watch another movie in order to be able to like give a full, you know, in-depth, not analysis, but to have a full appreciation for everything. I feel like I'd have to at least watch, you know, a movie with Deborah in it to be able to give my full like sense of, oh yeah, these are great actors. But this movie really kind of opened up my eyes to the idea of, because like, you know, I'm someone that's never really felt like I would want to be in a relationship, at least in high school wise. So to watch a movie like I feel like if I watched this movie in high school, I think I would have had a better understanding of, you know, how a relationship could, you know, work out. And considering that I only have like, you know, family members and friends that have went through things that almost made me want to straight up avoid getting into a relationship at the time, I could safely say that watching this movie now and you know, like I'm 20, I could have a relationship for like a couple years, or I could just like, you know, maybe start working towards that at like when I'm 30, when I'm 40. This movie will always be a reminder that all of that stuff that happens, you know, like the fighting, the tough decisions to make. It's just a part of life. And it's not like over the top like in some other romantic comedies or other comedic movies, to the point where it's just like, oh my God, like why the hell are these people still together? No, this movie is probably the most realistic romantic comedy that I've ever watched. And it's such a great movie. It's pretty, I found it for 30 bucks actually. It's just probably like $24.99 American. I found it for 30 bucks at like a retro store. But I guarantee you could find it online if you just type in full movie. Not saying like, I'm not advocating for piracy. I'm just saying that like if you just type in full movie, you're guaranteed to find results. That's a well-known fact. And but yeah, it's one of my favorites, and it's a movie that really resonates with me to this day. And it's easily like the first movie that I would want to watch with like a significant other or a partner. Like it's just one of those movies that's just perfect. And I'm surprised that it has a mid reputation, but a lot of movies that I love have mid reputations, but almost have 5 stars on Amazon. So I think real couples and, you know, real stories kind of overpower that negativity that happened in 1993, 1991, 92, whatever year that came out. But yeah, I knew this was going to be not too long of an episode. The next episode, I'm thinking about covering my love for the first 3, well, not really the first 3. Not the first 2, but the second and third album by Saves the Day, and how much I just love them. How much their music means so much to me, their lyrics, and how the amazing writing and albums as a whole just hold up to this day. And just how much, like, I didn't really dive into them originally, like through high school. I mean, I listened to a little bit of their Stay What You Are, but then I found out about Through Being Cool, and those two albums just back to back are just so good, and I really just want to glam over them. But yeah, 27 minutes. I guarantee, like, honestly, I'm probably just gonna put a disclaimer at the end of this video, just saying like, if you should probably listen to the Spotify version, because it's just going to be like hard on the eyes. But yeah, including new music, you know, there's going to be 2 albums from this next music project. I'm working on another project after that. Probably record after this, probably. And if I get bored, I'm just going to do something else. All right. Peace.